every time we do a training, we do a recognition of Indigenous lands. I think that that's really important to the climate movement, especially because Indigenous folks are the ones who have always been leading the fight for a fair climate. And we all live in different parts of the country. I live on the land of the Erie. And there's a map that I'm going to drop into the chat here that at a later date, don't get too distracted by it now. Please use this link to take a look at what Indigenous lands you're on and use that as an opportunity to reach out to those groups in your local area and maybe make a connection and see how you can support the work that they're doing and perhaps find natural growth from that of a way to work together for climate change in your local chapter or team. So these are our meeting norms. We've gone through these each time we're together, so I'll let you just kind of read them yourself for a minute. And a reminder that this is a training put on by Mothers Out Front. So I think most of you here are actually parts of Mothers Out Front teams. And you know that our mission is to build power as mothers to ensure a livable climate for all children. And I'll pass it to you, Anya.
One of the things that was my favorite at my own one-on-one training with Mothers Up Front was how we broke into breakouts as soon as the session started. So that's what we're going to do. So last week, Sheila tells me that y'all talked about one-on-one. So we want to break you up into small groups again, and Neely is going to help us do that. And in those small groups, we want you to talk about one-on-one. So who do you need or want to set up one-on-ones with in order to grow your team? Follow up with the people that you've met or that have expressed interest in your Mothers Out Front team, and why do you want to set up one-on-one? So that's what we're going to be discussing in the small group. So if I know the training just happened on Thursday, so if you can think of someone that you were thinking of, that would be great for your one-on-one. That's what you're going to be discussing with your small team. Neely, do we have the groups?
So welcome back, everybody. I hope those were good breakout groups. And there's another person who's been trying to join, but I think her internet is not working so well. Sheila, would you mind screen sharing again? Great, thank you. So as you can see, this is where we are in the series right now. You've had 3 sessions that are kind of the introductory pieces to base building. This is a 4th session today where we're going to focus on structures and action. And then at the end of the session today, Sheila's going to tell you a little bit more about the final 2 sessions, which will be a little different because they'll be part of a larger group. It's a training that is being offered across Mothers Out Front around winning climate organizing. Next slide. Awesome. So you've just had the introductions and the icebreaker. Right now we are in the midst of our review, and then most of our time are going to be spent on these 3 connected strands of leadership development, structures, and action. And then we'll close out by 9 o'clock. That is our plan today. And on our next slide, we are going to look at the goals. Terrific. So I'm going to pause and just give you about 30 seconds or so to read this slide to yourself. Take a moment to read the goals. I see either, I don't know if your name is pronounced Kata or Katha. I see your hand is raised.
Kathy with an A, not a Y.
Okay, so Katha.
Yeah, so I have a question about these because I'm really curious as to how you think of leader versus collaboration and team versus sort of structured how you build a structure within a collaborative team?
So those are great questions. We're going to actually kind of, the session is going to touch on those ideas. I just want to make sure I captured exactly what you said, because we'll have time for questions at the end, and then any remaining questions we can come back to. But you said leader versus.
So leader versus the sort of collaboration model where you're.
Okay, yeah, we'll
how do you create a structure where you're all equal?
we got to that is part of what we're talking about today.
Okay. That's great.
So terrific. So as you can see, this first bit is really about developing leaders, and that kind of follows up on the piece on one-to-ones that you did last week. As you're having one-to-ones, really, if you're a leader in Mothers Out Front, one of your main jobs is actually leadership development. And that's something that distinguishes Mothers Out Front from some other organizations, because we're not only about impact. Of course, our impact is important, but at the same time, we need to grow. And the way we grow is by growing leaders. And so that's one of the things we're going to talk about is strategies for leadership development. Then we're going to think about structure. And if you're trying to grow leaders, what's the structure that you're bringing them into? And then how do you use that structure to engage in actions that match your structure? And then how does that fit into the bigger picture? So that's kind of our journey today. And just to remind you, this is kind of what you've worked on in the earlier sessions, right? What base building is, why it matters, and not only why does it matter in general, but why does it matter that we're kind of intentional in our base building and that we think about reaching across demographics and think about intersectional issues, and why, if we want to win, we actually need a really big movement, right? So we have to be intentional in making it broad and diverse. You've worked a little bit on how, like, tabling and knocking on doors. What are some of the things that you can do to reach out to people? When you've connected with somebody, then how do you have that individual one-to-one conversation to begin to bring them in? How do you track what you're doing with those? And that brings us to today. That will be around kind of developing leaders, structures, and action. Okay. And
So we're going to start off with leadership development. Sheila, next slide. So on the left, you see a pile of bricks. So imagine getting a ton of pile of bricks and just dumping it in a construction site. That is not what gives you a house, right? How many of you feel like some of the projects that you're working on feel like the pile of bricks without a plan, without a house? So that is what your leadership development is all about. 1,000 isolated bricks do not make a house. You need a floor plan. So let's imagine the people that are volunteering with us, the people that, you table and you canvas, and they come up to you and they say they're really interested in what we're doing and they want to get involved. How many of you have had that kind of interaction when you go out into the community and someone says, hey, this sounds interesting, I would love to get involved? Raise your hand or drop something in the chat to see if others have the same reaction from their community. Have you all done anything recently where you find people coming in and saying, this sounds great, I just had a kid, I would love to get involved? And then you come back and that list of names never goes on Nation Builder, doesn't get captured anywhere. And you're like, yeah, so many people that I needed to reach out to. I have to say that happens very frequently. A lot of us have a lot of people that we reach out to and show interest, and then it really doesn't go much anywhere. So imagine all of those people as bricks, or all your potential volunteers, everyone that can help us with the movement as bricks. We don't just drop them in a pile, right? We want to get them as part of the plan and build a house out of that. So each brick has a place, fits with others to make a sturdy foundation. So we need to unify, strategically develop, fit together all the people we recruit as a team, figure out like where the gaps are, recruit people for those little gaps. We need to build our house, build our foundation. And that's how we build a powerful movement. And that is where leadership development and structure come in. So we talk a little bit about structure a little later on, but next slide. We wanted to show you the ladder of engagement. So this is something that is unique to Mothers Out Front, the terms we use. So this might be a little theoretical, so bear with me. So we build our power by engaging moms and others and developing their level of engagement in our movement. So we start with supporters. So if you look at the bottom, people that are supporting us. We go on to people that take action, and then we go on to leaders. A lot of you are in the taking action and leader space. So if we look at supporters, these are our base. They're the pool of potential volunteers. They've taken some low-level action. They've demonstrated interest. They might have donated to a campaign. They might have clicked on some things. You know, they are supportive of our agenda and our mission. They're just doing bare minimum things. Then we go on to taking action. The taking action people. These are the people that are taking some level of action. It involves a little bit more commitment, coming to meetings, getting food, or, you know, doing a little bit more than the supporting run. These are the people that can become potential leaders. It also tells us a lot about how much capacity we have. What does our pipeline for leadership look like, and how much we can grow our movement? And then we have the leaders. People in the leader rung of our ladder of engagement are heavily invested in taking responsibility. They will say, hey, how about we run a campaign like this? How about, you know, I will sit in on this collaboration call, and I will check in with them, and I will bring back that information to our team meetings. I will be the lead organizer for something, or I will be taking on officer roles or something like that. So someone that even represents their constituents in cities, states, coalition calls, like, you know, someone like me that was part of the San Francisco team, but then joined the national leadership team. So those people are also leaders. And I know there's a typo in the ladder of engagement up here, who are our leaders. And so if we look at our movement and we look at these three rungs, we're going to think about how these rungs are helping us build our movement. Next slide. So in a little bit, we will do an exercise to just think about how many people are in that rung, what does our team look like? But let's talk about leadership asks. So it's important to scale people up with the right sized ask. So you cannot scare off a new person if someone's coming up to you at a tabling event and saying, wow, I just had a baby. The world is, you know, going to hell in a handbasket. I need to do something. Maybe not saying like, take on this campaign where you talk to our city supervisor and get them to get into like gas appliances. Might not be the right ask for them, right? You start them off easy. Don't scare them with a huge ask. Don't scare them with a formal ask, unless, of course, you feel like they're ready for it. Start with something small, work your way up, support the volunteer with training. Mothers Out Front is amazing with training. So, you know, you'll always have a training for people. Do one-on-ones with them, try to find out what their interests really are in, because the panic response is not always the best way to build your movement. So take their nervous energy and channel it to something that is effective. You're always looking for a way to progress people in. So like you can see on the slide, you can sign a petition and then say attend a meeting, bring a friend to a meeting, collect signatures, take on a little bit more of a participatory role, run a portion of the team meeting, and then take on a team role. And that team role can be anything, and we'll go a little bit into that. But you can be the treasurer, you can be the data person, you can be the organizer, you can be the person taking notes, sending out meeting notes, sending out calendar invites, all of those are team roles, and those are all important. Think of those bricks. Each of them has a role to play. So now we'll do an exercise where we think about the asks and the members, and then Sheila will lead us in an exercise to put it all together. So let's start with the first one. So what are some small tasks you can think of that you can ask a new member to take? If you want to unmute and just say it out loud, that's great. Either you're thinking that, oh, I should ask this new member to do this, or you have asked a new member and that has been successful, or a task that someone has asked you to do when you were new to the chapter. Tell a friend, that's a great one. You can also chat it out if you don't want to be on camera or unmuted. What are some good small actions? Donate, yeah. Put up flyers for an event, yeah, that's a good one.
Notes. Take
Sorry?
notes. Take notes at the
Take
meeting.
notes, yeah, that's one of my favorite ones, especially if someone's like, I don't know what's going on here. Great, take notes, learn what's going on here.
For one organization, I was asked to help create an acronym list, and I was brand new to the organization. So I would just start reading some of the stuff on the website and say, oh, what the heck is that? And look it up. So it was a great learning experience for me, and concrete, you know,
Yeah,
doable.
right. And, you know, we also have to remember that not every mom that's signing up for our movement is, you know, has a PhD in environmental studies. They might be coming at it from a very passion angle and might not know all the building blocks of like, how do you talk to your local government bodies, or how do you advocate for electric school buses? So, you know, anything to make them comfortable with feeling like they belong in this space is very important. That's great. And what are some medium tasks? Like, okay, once they have like signed a petition, put up flyers, done a little bit of like research work, taken notes, what would you say would be a medium next step that you could ask people to take?
One thing that occurs to me is to ask them to just sit in on a Zoom meeting about an important issue, whether it's a Mothers Out Front meeting or it's a, you know, government office meeting, just so that they become informed. They don't have to do anything, but just ask them to become informed by attending.
That's a good one. I was invited to a meeting with an assembly member, and I was like, I have no idea what this meeting is about. I'm just going to sit in, and they gave me talking points. They were like, these are talking points. If there was anyone else in your place, we would probably have not like given them talking points. We would have just waited, but we want you to say something. And it was so simple. It was just asking for a thing or two. And when it came my turn to talk, I obviously like embellished it, like made it my own. And it was such a positive experience because I don't think I would have actually gone ahead and said anything in that meeting. So yeah, that's a good tabling at an event. Yes, perfect thing to do. You know, people come and ask you questions, and if you don't know, it's great learning experience. All right, what is some other medium-ish asks you can ask people to do?
I think sometimes there might be members that are also members of other organizations. And I think we could like get an invite to go to that organization and present, go on their agenda and present what, you know, Mothers Out Front is about. And we might, you know, we might get some people joining us from there, you know, just giving exposure to the organization.
Yes, attending coalition calls, introducing yourself, going and presenting about Mothers Out Front are great medium steps. All right, what are some solid leadership roles that you want to ask people to do, where you feel, okay, this person's ready to be a leader. This is what I'm going to have them do to see if they would be able to run with this. Any examples for that? Run a meeting. Build an agenda, yeah. Can we ask people to come up with a new campaign based on like what they're hearing from the constituents? They've done something like a tabling event or something.
I wouldn't start there, but I would definitely ask them to choose something that they're very passionate about that's within, you know, the group of issues that are being worked on, and present some information about it to mothers out front. I think that kind of is the baby step that makes you start
Right.
thinking in terms of a campaign.
And it shows initiative. It also gives you a little bit of a peek into like what they're really interested in, and just helps you groom a better leader. So, you know, at whatever rung you are, Sheila, if you can go to the next slide. I think as an organizer, you have to start thinking of your team in this bullseye kind of structure, and you're trying to get people closer and closer to leading. You're always going to have more supporters, more of your base, and then you're trying to push them closer and closer to leading, because remember, leaders also burn out, leave the movement, have another kid, or cannot like attend some meetings or move out of the state. There are a lot of things that happen with leaders too. So you cannot just count on the same leaders over and over again. So that's going to be, you know, your goal is going to be looking at your team, you know, just draw a bullseye for your own team and be like, okay, how many people do I have here? How many people do I have in taking action? How many people can I honestly say are leading right now? How many people from taking action can I start pushing into leading slowly? So that's going to be your exercise. You don't have to do it right now, but that's something that you can do after this meeting is done. And I'll move it on to you, Sheila, to do the next exercise, which is closely connected, but dives into a little bit more into detail.
Yeah, so now we're gonna drop a worksheet into the chat, and it's a leadership development plan. These can be way more detailed, and actually should, but it gives you a taste of what it can look like to really sit down. Like, you're gonna assess and map out who do you have on which levels in your mind, or you could even draw out that bullseye. Who do you have in the supporting? Who do you have in the taking action? Who do you have in the leading? And who do you want to purposely move up into that bullseye? You know, you're always trying to move people closer towards the center of the bullseye, or in other words, give them more leadership, more development, and help them become a really integral part of your team. And so we're going to give you 10 minutes in groups of 3 to work quietly on these plans. And you'll probably have time for 1, maybe 2 leaders. So I want you to bring a leader to your mind that you know, or I use the word leader, but I mean a volunteer that you know you want to move into more of a leadership role or more of a taking action role, and how you're going to do that. And then you'll have about 5 minutes to share back with the group in your small groups, who that person is and what your plan for development for them is. And so I'm going to drop this link into the chat. What you can do is make a copy of it and then work on that copy. If you don't have a team yet, I saw somebody say, I don't have a team yet, how to do this exercise. I think you could do it theoretically. You could just imagine that you have a team and what you would do to take somebody and move them up the leadership rung. Or you could work with someone else who's maybe a little stumped about what they could do to develop that leader if you want to. And I'll just show you what this worksheet looks like briefly, and make sure that it's clear what you're doing. So you're going to come to think of one person at least to start. Here I have imaginary Sarah Brown that you want to move up the leadership ladder. And what are their talents and interests? This person, we're saying their talent is connecting people and art. Then you're going to ask yourself, what is an appropriate task or role, depending where they already are, how much they've already taken on, that you could give to them. And we're saying doing turnout calls for an upcoming art build. So this person is currently on the supporting role of the leadership ladder, and we want them to move to the taking action role or rung. So some tactics to move them there would be to ask her to make phone calls to get volunteers for an art build for our big action on March 4th. We're saying. By when? By March 4th. And the next steps are date and action. By January 1st or January 2nd, have a one-to-one with her and pose the question of whether or not she would be willing to coordinate. I'm sorry, that should say to make phone calls for the art build. Then by the 2nd of February, train her to make phone calls to invite people to the art build. By March 4th, execute the art build with volunteers. And then by the 7th, have another one-to-one and debrief. So this is immediately following the action. See how did it go for her? If she's feeling good about it, if she'd like to be, you can kind of then move her up to another rung of what you're asking her to do and see if she'd like to be part of the coordinating team for the next art build. And who is going to be the point person? Because oftentimes we'll say, we're going to do this, we're going to develop this person this way, but no one has the job of doing it. We don't know by when, we don't know how. So this just gives you a little bit of practice. You'll probably have time to do it with one person. So you can, again, make a copy of that. We'll break you out into groups of 3 now. You'll get about 10 minutes to work leader and then 5 minutes to share back briefly with each other. You guys have any questions?
Oh, sorry, so we work silently all together in the room, and then we confer with each other in the room.
Yes.
Thanks.
So 15 minutes total.
And on our own copy.
Yes. So you're going to work on your own copy unless you have someone who's in your team that you want to work with. But I believe all of you are on different teams. So we'll send you to breakout rooms now, and you can always write into the chat if you have a question or come back to the main room if you have a question. Okay.
I haven't.
And we'll send people to the breakout rooms now, but anyone who has a question, stay here so as to not lose time.
Okay.
Go ahead, Carol.
My question is, I have in mind a person that's already on my team. Is that all right?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. Perfect.
All right. Okay. Well, then I'm all set.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think everybody's been assigned. Anya, I think there's somebody here from California. Do you want to go to the, I think that's Myra. Do you want to go to that room?
And Barbara, do you know how to join your room? I see you're assigned to room 1. I don't know if you've seen that pop up yet or if you know how to join that room.
Let's see. How do I do that?
Let's see. How does it show up on people's screen? Do either of you know?
Well, you should get a little pop-up window that says like you've been invited to join breakout room 1. Do you see anything like that? What, and what kind of device are you on, Barbara? Are you on a computer?
I'm on my desktop. Yeah. Let's see.
So you should get something like that. If you don't see that, towards the bottom of your screen, you should have like a few different choice, like icons like participants and chat, and one of them might say breakout groups. It has
okay.
4 little squares.
Thank you. I got it. Thank you.
Sure. And I think Myra is having computer trouble because she keeps kind of coming and going. Oh, let me set it. So that's probably been at least a minute, right?
Yeah. We are, let's see. So for this section, which is good, we have the slush time. See, it's working out. We should be done with it at 7:45 my time, which is in 3 minutes. So if we need to, we can probably take away time from working on escalation plans, which has a whole 25 minutes for that.
Okay.
Yeah, that on our radar.
I think it's worth it to give them time here.
Yeah.
So maybe give this the full. Should we give this the full 15 minutes?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like for next time, Sheila, I think we need a little bit more time than 15 minutes for the leadership development and the team structure, because I'm feeling maybe that might require a little, because we are asking people. I mean, this is a small group, so we're asking people to speak up.
Yeah. Something I struggle with is trying to fit too much into my trainings. That's good feedback. And also not a mystery to me that I keep trying to fit too much in. So if either of you have, maybe we'll debrief and get some more tips from you.
I'm gonna join room 2 just in a bit, because there's only like 2 people there.
I'll assign you to that room if you want. Although you can just
I
move.
can join. Yeah, I can join. I can.
You've got the power.
You know, Neely, is it supposed to tell us when there's like a certain amount of time left in the rooms? It may have
No,
happened.
I guess there are ways to set it that way, but I have not. I just use my phone and I set it. It was about a minute after we started and I set it for 13 minutes. So when my timer goes off, I'll send a message saying we're gonna, actually, that's when we should close it. So when there's 1 minute left on my phone, I'll try to send a 1 minute left.
Yeah, it usually flashes across the top, 1 minute left, but I didn't see it this time, but I could have been too engrossed in conversation.
I did send a 1 minute warning message in the last one.
Awesome.
And also, like, as a host, it looks different for us, so it could have just been that.
Yeah.
And Neely, you saw the text chain is different.
Yes, whatever Sheila just texted on, though, I got it. So
Yeah.
that's the one we
Yeah.
should use, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Neely, at 10 minutes, if you can let them know, now it's time to switch to sharing or something, that would be good too.
They might not even need a full 10 minutes. Like they might need more time for talking. I'm wondering. Maybe we should each. So
Yeah, I think if we are in the rooms, we can kind of like play it by ear and see like what they really need.
Yeah. So now they've had about almost 5 minutes so far to talk. Okay, so structures to support growth. So sorry, I just want to make sure I'm unmuted. Okay, everybody. I hope that was helpful for you. I know in our group, also there's some people here who aren't who don't yet have teams, but even thinking about it for themselves, Kathy kind of thought about it from her own experience to like develop her understanding of what this meant. And so hopefully this exercise helped you see the way that in Mothers Out Front, we can take somebody who is kind of at the beginning and kind of grow them. So if you're going to be, developing people to take on more responsibility, you want to really think about creating the structures then that you're moving them into, right? And you can think about this, as a team, if you're, part of a group that has other people, you kind of want to seed them into this, into structures. And one of the reasons structure is so important is so that you've got everybody working towards the same goal, so that you're not like a lot of people who are all sort of interested in climate action, but off doing different things, so that people's skills and talents and passions can come together to move towards one bigger goal. Thank you. You read my mind. So I'll just pause for people to read this quote. So often, I think our culture thinks of leadership as like being the one in front, being the one who's taking charge. But in Mothers Out Front, we want to really make sure we're thinking about leadership as actually enabling other people to do things. So that is part of what structure helps us achieve, is as we pull people into a structure, they have clarity around what it is they are going to be doing. Okay. Thank you. So step number 1, purpose. Oh. And you got to preview step number 2. So obviously number 1, like purpose. You want to make sure that you know that everybody knows what it is you're trying to do. If you're in a chapter that has meetings, for example, like in Arlington, my chapter, we read the Mothers Out Front mission at the beginning of our monthly chapter meeting, and we reiterate what our goal is as a chapter, just to make sure we are all on the same page. You also want to think about having norms, right? Think about the way that you work together, the way you make decisions. And I think one of the most important pieces there is how we model the kind of norms that we want to see on our team, right? And we're not going in depth on the concept of norms today, but if that is new to you, this idea of like kind of what are the ways that we all participate and interact together. If that's a new concept, then please reach out, because I think that, maybe that's something we could figure out a way to support people on in terms of training. And our third piece, and this is the one we're going to be digging into today, is think about how you're really organized and kind of work to match whatever the roles and the tasks are with what people, are interested in doing and have the capacity to do. And this is a really important place to think about, do we have people who are helping us understand our whole community? Do we have people who are bringing the experience and the perspectives of the broad reach of our community, so that our team will really be able to be stronger in what we're doing? So we are going to be thinking about this idea. Our structure in Mothers Out Front is a snowflake. And this is to differentiate from what people might, often kind of leadership ladders in like corporations have like the person at the top, and they oversee and they oversee and they oversee, and it's a very hierarchical structure. And in Mothers Out Front, we think of structure as a snowflake. Because we do need to have organization, right? You can't just have everybody off doing everything, because then it's very hard to have clear purpose and to all be moving together in the same direction. But what the idea of a snowflake is that the leader is not, the coordinator is not on top of everybody. The coordinator is helping to hold like the center of gravity in that snowflake, and help make sure that the different parts of the snowflake are all working together. Okay. Okay. Actually, can you go back to that for 1 second? Thank you. Because what I want to point out, that here's an example of what some of the roles and the needs of a team might be. Right. So you might, and these are very common roles on a team. You might have somebody who's in charge of events and meetings, and somebody who's in charge of communications, and somebody who's in charge of outreach, a database, stories, or each of those little bits of the snowflake might have a few people then, right? That's how you build your snowflake out. But something to keep in mind is each, just like snowflakes are very individual, and if you catch 100 snowflakes and look at them under a microscope, they'll all be a little bit different. Each team, the snowflake adapts to both the needs and capacities of the people on the team, and also the needs of your campaign, depending on what your goals are. Okay, next slide. So some tips for building that snowflake out. So one is just asking people, right, to do something. And there can often be some real subtleties in how we phrase our asks for people. So, and actually I have learned that I am a story that one of the co-founders of Mothers Out Front shares. for asking people to do something. Very early on in Mothers Out Front, she called me and asked me to be the house party coordinator for my new team. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm way too busy. I cannot do that. And then she said, well, I hear you. What about helping, these two people find dates for house parties and helping them get people invited to the house parties? And I was like, okay, I could do that. So the more concrete and smaller she made it, the more I was able to do it. Of course, by the time I did those two, then she said, coordinating house parties is really just doing that like a few more times. So like, what do you think? And I said, oh, I guess I can do that role. So really finding smaller pieces to edge people along, I am proof that that can be very effective. So instead of saying, would you be our data coordinator, you might ask, could you just put in Nation Builder, the people that attend our events, right? It's very concrete and small. And that's what the data coordinator does, right? And the other thing to keep in mind is to not have too much going on. That trying to, part of a coordinator's role is actually to help keep focus so that people don't get too scattered and burned out, okay? And yeah, celebrating people, I think, is really important, and appreciating, right? Part of the reason we all do this work, I think, is the relationships that we build with each other. I'm always so inspired and nourished by the relationships in Mothers Out Front. All right. So then, as I was saying, you can kind of build more and more people. And again, this is really important because when you're trying to move people up that leadership ladder, if you have one person who's already agreed to be in charge of events and meetings, then you can ask somebody newer to help them out, right? And if the newer person has somebody with more experience that they're able to kind of collaborate with, it brings them in a way that's very organic, that builds relationships. And then in another little bit of time, they might be ready to lead that events team, right? Because they've kind of had a little apprenticeship with the person who's already in charge of it. So when you think about your snowflake, you don't necessarily need to like fill every, kind of bigger role first, right? It's okay, like bring people on with what they're ready for, with the long game in mind, right? And one, something to keep in mind is you don't want any one person to have like too many people to coordinate, like 5 to 15 people at most. That might sound like, whoa, I should be so lucky to have, that many people, but you don't want to get people overwhelmed. And another thing to think about is, and it's actually harder to do this, but you never want to do for other people what they could do for themselves. That's a golden rule of organizing. And sometimes that's harder than doing it yourself, right? And so you have to really try to pay attention to, is this something I could ask somebody else to do? Because that's what moves people up that leadership ladder, and that's what really grows your team. So we're going to pause for a moment now to ask you. I want to just check are we doing okay with time, Sheila, to have this conversation? Let's see. Because we just wanted to ask, like, how do your team structures compare to this? And does this raise questions for you about the concept of team structure? Maybe we will stop sharing for just a moment so we could see each other. And we'll just take like 5 minutes or 3 minutes for a short conversation. Sheila, do you mind if you stop sharing, and that way we can see each other?
So I'll share that after the last base building workshop last year, Leadership Academy workshop, our team leader came and said, okay, let's do the snowflake model. And it was the first time most of us had seen the snowflake model. And we had never been that organized, and it really helped put things in perspective, and it kind of clarified roles and responsibilities. It's another thing that we haven't really stuck to it because people left and we had like a lot of like leadership changes, but it feels like it's a great first step when you have a bunch of volunteers with not much structure.
I wanted to say that Gas Leaks Allies was one of the leaders and founders of it was a Mothers Out Front participant, and brought the ladder of engagement and all of these concepts to play. And she has to leave now for a year, and she's trying to grow the leadership within Gas Leaks Allies, which is a Massachusetts, Boston area thing. And we've just gone through a long process of trying to create our own structure. So this workshop is really helpful to me for thinking. There are two things I work with, Trees for Watertown and Gas Leaks Allies. And Mothers Out Front is one of the organizations in the coalition that is Gas Leaks Allies. But this is very close to what the sort of structure that has been just worked out.
Great, thank you.
Well, I think
So you can see that like the theory has real life application here, right? Sheila, I know you said we really only had like 2 minutes, so we should probably continue on then. Sorry that we can't do more robust discussion now. But I do hope that this responded also to some of your the question that Katha raised earlier about like, how do we think about collaboration within our structure? Because I think you can see that that's actually what this is all about, right? Is this collaboration. So the way that we also think about this structure, right, is we're building chapters, great, Katha, thank you, at the community level, right, that have this snowflake structure. And that helps us build local campaigns and win local campaigns. And then we want to move to the next level so that the chapters also become kind of snowflaked together, right? Chapters across a state get snowflaked together so that they can win statewide campaigns. And Massachusetts like built its snowflake. By now, every chapter has one person who's a member of our statewide leadership team. So that kind of then becomes the center of the snowflake, is this statewide leadership team that connects out to each of the chapters. And I think that's an important thing to think about with a snowflake, is how do you make sure that the connections between the different parts of the snowflake stay strong? Because that communication is really essential. Okay. So we're going to be making a shift now into action and strategy. And I hope you see that like having this strong model for a structure and with roles that you can kind of begin to plug people into, then that kind of helps unify you so that now you can use that structure to take action in ways that are strategic and that actually really make important change locally, statewide, and eventually nationally. I'm going to be turning things over to Sheila, and I'm actually going to wave goodbye. I'm sorry that I'm going to have to scoot out a little bit early, but it has been really wonderful to be with all of you. Thank you. And I hope we overlap and connect in the future. So off to you, Sheila.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Okay, this is the fun part. This is the, quote unquote sexy part, is the action. I think when people think of like movements, social action, they picture people, I picture people filling the streets with signs in their hands, taking action against a target, which is a will learn here is a person who can give you what you're asking for. But it's all this background work that comes with building an effective movement. And so that's why this fun part, and it really can be very fun, is last, because we want to take strategic action and harness the power of people in numbers. So the whole idea of base building, you need a base, you need a lot of people. And you start off with a small amount of people. So you start with small actions and then you work your way up as you attract more people to you into your and continue to grow, hopefully. So when you're taking action strategically, you want to set campaign goals. And that looks like just saying, what is your demand? What do you want? Do you want electric school buses in your school district? Do you want to end gas leaks where you live? You want to close down a pipeline. There's various different ways that we can attack climate change. Who is your target is the next question you want to ask. So who has the power to give it to you? And this is a person. It shouldn't be a corporation, an organization. It should be a person, or sometimes that involves people, but you want to be able to name them, because otherwise you can't then use tactics to put pressure on them. And so tactics are those fun, sexy actions that we think of when we think of organizing. They put pressure on the decision maker that you've identified. And you always want to consider, how many people do you have is essentially what our power comes down to. And with that power, what can you win on? And that's where your leverage is. So when you have 3 people, you can take a very small action that will build enthusiasm, that if going into it, you can win it. In community organizing, that may not really directly be related to working on climate change, but an example I've heard is like getting a stop sign installed in your community. And actually that can be pretty hard too, but something that seems very small, almost insignificant, but it's probably important to the community. And from that win, you can jump off, attract more people to you, and then set a higher goal next time. So you can take action with a small number of people. So what is action? Basically, it's a group of people confronting your target, again, your decision maker who can give you what you want, and making specific demands. So they're the most critical opportunity to flex your organization's muscle and demonstrate its power in numbers to your target. And some advantages of action, especially when we talk about something called direct action, which can sometimes also be breaking various laws or codes in your city, in your state. It cuts through months and sometimes years of bureaucratic red tape. And they take their org out of the established channels for getting things done and move it into a terrain where officials are less sure of how to handle the situation. And so, not all laws are fair, not all laws are just. And so sometimes we need to assess as an organization what's going to cut through that red tape the quickest. And if we do have, and we have built up our power in numbers, that can often be the most direct route to, getting what your objective is, your goal is, and attracting the right people to your movement. And it also gives you an opportunity through that to ID new leaders. And so these are members who are action oriented. They'll see that you're taking action on climate change and they want to be a part of that. So you always want to have like a clipboard, a way to sign people up, a couple people, or, depending on how big your action is, going to be a number of people who are assigned just to the role of continuing to base build. So this is, this whole series is about base building. Base building doesn't stop. Once you started base building at the beginning, it goes on as a cycle throughout your whole campaign. And what makes a good action? You want to make sure it relates to your issue. So again, we don't want to just have like a march for the heck of it, right? Like it should actually be putting pressure on your target so that they will give you what your demand is, whatever you've decided your demand is in your campaign. Will it increase pressure on that decision maker? Is it simple, visible? So being visible is really important, because if these things happen behind closed doors, it's not in a public space, and it's not going to attract new leaders to you. It's not going to change the conversation about the issue in your community. And it's, you know, it won't get you media attention either, which is also very good for base building. Is it timed for the effect you want? Is it new and different or tried and true? Both can be good. Are there enough people ready to do it? And that is a whole other thing, like making sure that you can count on having a certain amount of people show up to your action in your event. And that's another training that we can do at Mothers Out Front about how to do turnout. How will others react? And you don't want to put that, you know, sometimes people will react poorly and others will react well. So it's not the only consideration. It's about which people you want to react a certain way. How will it unify, not just people, but your base? Because again, we know that sometimes actions can be polarizing, but that's okay. But how will it unify your base of people? Could it backfire? How will management react? That should not be in there. Erase that. Does it violate the law or, you know, the city ordinances? And if it does, that is okay. Sometimes, again, we're not always going to follow laws that are unjust. Are you prepared for the consequences? And will it be fun? So here are some examples of actions that, you know, we can probably think of a whole bunch of actions, but here's a few, and then I'll ask you to drop some more into the chat. So testifying. So if your target is a city council person or a few people on city council, for example, testifying to city council, marches and rallies, mutual aid, texting, which is, you know, right now we have a lot of apps and ways of texting to huge amounts of people at once and quickly responding to them. And it helps build your base and get more people involved. Telling stories at house meetings or in other events, partnering with allies, candidate forums where you're really putting pressure on people who may be running for elected official to, you know, say which side of your issue they stand on. So what are some other actions that people have done or they could think of? And you can get as creative as you want. Drop it into the chat or unmute if you want to share. So other public actions that you'd like, let's say that you'd love to do. Sit-ins, blocking traffic, definitely. That one is a huge, if you have the power to do it, use it. Drawings, posters, postcards delivered to decision makers, definitely. And that's definitely like a lower level action you can ask a brand new person to take easily. So that's a nice one for that beginning step for a new person. Sit-ins or marches. This year's Wake Up State House, 11th hour to pass climate bill in Massachusetts. All right, so you guys have some ideas there. I think you're probably clear on what an action can look like, and they can get really creative and fun too. So I'll now turn it over to Anya.
So you have a goal now, you have a target, you know what actions you need to take to put pressure. But if you take a bunch of actions that are not strategic or not coordinated, if they're disorganized, they're not going to build our movement. We need to create something that we call an escalation plan or a campaign plan. That's something that's going to turn up the heat. It's going to bring people to the movement. It's going to bring people to the organization. You know, we want it to be such that the target has no choice but to give in. Something that reaches a crescendo and the target feels the pressure from all sides and says, okay, fine, let's just do it. So that's what a campaign plan would be like. It's exciting, it develops a lot of initiative, it attracts leaders, it will get people to show up, and it will get results. So it's not just individual things happening in a vacuum that you write up and you say, wow, great, we did this one action and then it didn't go anywhere. So this part is all about how do we take those actions and build it onto something, and that's where your leadership will come into play. Next slide. So when we are thinking of an escalation plan, let's practice creating one from scratch. Okay, so think of a target and say we want to, let's use an example of a school that wants to get their bus fleet electric. Okay, how do we do the slow escalating actions that get you to a campaign plan? So we start with a large march or a rally, demonstrations, we get op-eds, we get our people that say, hey, I'm interested in writing, get them to do those op-eds. You meet with supporters, you petition, you get signatures, then you take it to the school board members, and then, as a follow-up, you conduct a health survey, and that there you have like a complete campaign where you say, okay, start to finish, this is how we did it. Those campaigns are the keystone of what we are doing at Mothers Out Front. Because once you have a successful campaign, we will be asking you to present to other teams how they could do their campaigns as well. And soon, like the snowflake model, it's going to build that power throughout the nation. And when we're looking at national campaigns where we need to like put in resources and put in our messaging money, that's where we're going to narrow it down on these amazing standalone campaigns that build the movement. Next slide. So you might have a bigger goal than what is achievable with the team that you have. You might not have enough volunteers, you might not have enough dedicated members to put that kind of pressure, and that's okay. You can still keep the larger goal in mind. You can still tell your team what the larger goal is, and then set up smaller goals so that you can say, okay, 2023, this is what we want to be doing, but we need to do all these things in 2022 to get there. And so we keep our snowflake in mind, keep our structure in mind, and keep moving till we have a big enough base to win that ultimate goal or issue. Next slide. So think of an example. We're going to try and do our own thermometer exercise. Okay, we're going to think of an example or an organizing issue that you want to take on with a demand, with a target. And then we'll spend 10 minutes to quietly write down a series of collective actions we can take to put pressure on the target. And then once we have done that, we're going to look at it from low to high pressure. So starting with something very basic, trying to figure out like how this works in the community, to getting it in front of the decision makers and maybe helping write legislation. And so work on that quietly for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and share. Since this is a small group, we can just share it out in this group. So if you have a good plan that is laid out, you can work on something that's already existing, or you can think of something from scratch. So let's start that timer now. And then we'll come back in 10 minutes and share back.
And if people do finish before the 10 minutes, you can drop done into the chat. And if for some reason everybody finishes early, we'll just come back together. But you have 10 minutes.
So Sheila, if you can bring it back to slide 33. So Sheila just reminded me during the break that I went in the wrong order. It's actually conduct health survey first, meet with key school board members, petition with 300 signatures. It goes from bottom to top in the order of pressure. You know, it's a Sunday evening, so I am sure we're making a lot of those kind of mistakes. Also, I'm in San Francisco. We have a rally for everything. So I was like, that's an easy thing to start with, have a rally. So sorry about that. So, I mean, I'm sure all of you will figure that out. It's from the bottom to the top. So let's hear a little bit about your own pressure maps, your thermometer exercise. Anyone want to share? And give us a little background on the campaign that you're thinking about.
So we have a coal flare plant in Pueblo that we were able to make them close down by 2031 instead of 2070 or 2040, I'm not sure, but it was like 40 years of shutdown. But I still think it's a huge issue because how many people are still being poisoned in those years. So I was going to create a survey for the community most affected and then present that survey at a town hall. That goes over also the awful consequences of coal-fired plants and the air quality. And then stage a rally outside of the XL plant and then create a petition to shut down the plant and then block the entrances to the coal-fired plant and then write legislators on the action and invite them in. And then, yeah, that's all I got.
See, doesn't that sound exciting? Doesn't that sound so much more like I want to be part of this movement? Then can you enter all our data in Nation Builder? Definitely something worth doing, but you know, this is what calls people into the movement. And then there's that little piece of pride and community, like I'm working towards that so that my kids can breathe cleaner air in the future, right? So keep going back to our mission, keep going back to our theory of change and getting people engaged that way. I love it, Jordan. Maybe come back to the group and tell us how it goes. Anyone else want to share? And if you're getting stuck on something, this would be a great time to clarify that as well. Like, how do I get from this low pressure action to a high pressure action?
Barbara, did you have anything?
I'd like to know, first of all, if anybody's had a successful campaign, for instance, on the gas leaks in our area. What did you do? What was successful? And maybe some of us could have our own meeting and share best practices or whatever. Because I think the first step would be to probably distribute a map that shows where the leaks are, try to get people riled up about living near where the gas leaks are. That's what the issue that brought me into this organization in the first place. And then maybe get some people to sign a petition, take the petition to our town council meeting. Last year we had a demonstration in front of our local gas company, just to draw media attention to the issue. And they had the local TV stations came to it. Carol Walker, did you go to that?
Oh, that thing.
Excuse me.
Karina and me and
What was that? That wasn't gas leaks though. That was something else, I think. But I think another thing that we could do is more effectively use social media than we're doing. I mean, we have our local Mothers Out Front page or Facebook group, whatever. But I think it could be energized somehow, and I'd like to learn how other people have done that. I don't know. I think a large meeting with supporters is a good idea too. Maybe get some experts in to show what the dangers are of gas leaks. And at the time that I joined this organization, we weren't even aware of, or I wasn't aware of the dangers of kitchen gas in the kitchen. I was more aware of sidewalk gas leaks that were killing trees, and they passed out some maps of, serious leaks and maps of what had been fixed in the last year and what was still leaking, and I don't know. I think that certainly raised me, got my interest. So I signed the petition, I went to the meetings, but the issue is still out there. Some communities like Brookline, which are way ahead of the game, have banned new gas hookups. I'd like to know how we could do that in our town, perhaps, at some point. We have a huge development that's going to be happening right near where we are at Suffolk Downs. They expect to have like 10,000 residential units, hotels, all kinds of businesses, biotech, and that's another huge user of gas. Another issue that we haven't talked about yet is what kind of biotech research are they doing? What kind of animals are they using? You know, that is just something that new that we're just beginning to think about. Maybe we should be protesting some of that, trying to organize against what viruses are they going to have, and what, I mean, most of us who are non-scientific have no clue what questions to even ask.
But we'd have to kind of focus on one thing. With the new development coming up there, maybe we should go on to, maybe we would have to have one focus and go with the banning the new gas hookups, because maybe we can't have too many things that we're focusing on. So maybe,
Yeah, I'm just saying there were things a couple of years ago that got me interested, but there are new developments that might appeal to other new people too, especially with all the new awareness of bio labs and what is in them, what are the dangers. We never even thought about that before.
And I think to Carol's point, you know, how do we bring our organizing power as moms to these issues so that when someone's showing interest in being involved, how do we speak to their values as well? So there might be 5 things to worry about, 5 campaigns to choose from. How do we pick a campaign that works for 2022? And definitely something where you're like, okay, this new development is coming, it's going to be all gas. How do we try to put a stop on that? And there are a lot of jurisdictions across the Mothers of Trent states where we have effectively stopped gas from being put in new construction, and now we're trying to go towards old construction. And how do we build it out for you know, having electric appliances? And that talks a lot into our you know, our organizing as moms, right? Like, how do we talk about indoor air pollution and our kids' health? So Sheila, if you could share the next slide. So how all of this fits together, how do we like tie it all together, is we need power in numbers to win against any of our issues and the corporate interests. That is our base. So step 1, recruit your base. Step 2, develop your leaders. Step 3, create a structure, a model to support your growth, so make it sustainable. And step 4, take escalating action, build up the heat, add to your base, enable yourself to take bigger and bigger action. So that's how you tie it all together and, you know, build a movement that is self-sustaining, where you have leaders in the pipeline. And instead of, you know, being kind of scattered in all directions, you're organized, you know, in this image of all the small fish against the large fish. I really like this image. So that's where we are trying to go. So I think with that, you have in your heads an idea of like how you want your team to go forward. And I'll pass it back on to Sheila.
Hey, well, so actually what I'm going to say is you did it. You made it through. So we didn't make this explicit at the beginning, but I'm going to make it explicit now. This is a 6-part series, and the first 4 focused on base building. But at Mothers Out Front, we're really becoming clear on the fact that anti-racism needs to be integral to everything we do. And so actually the last 2 of this series are just focused on how to understand the connections between racism and climate change and undo those in our movement, in our teams, in ourselves. And so when I say you did it, you completed the base building series of this 6-part series. And I want to ask before we move on to our last couple slides today, if I can drop this link into the chat. It's a very short, not a survey, but just asking for you to give a little feedback on, like, have you taken any action or planned any action to build your base based on this series? If so, are there any specific people whose names you can provide and last name that you have either recruited or had a one-to-one with? And so it's just 2 or 3 questions. If you can take a second right now to fill that out to the best of your knowledge. And if you have names that you need to like look up and get back to me, you can either keep it open on your screen, fill it out once you have that list in your hand tomorrow, or email me to, which I'll drop my email in the chat. But we'd really like to be able to track, and this is kind of modeling for you also how important tracking things are. You know, did this actually have an impact, or will it? Maybe you're planning something on how you're doing your base building. And that's information for me as the training manager and for the organization about if this is working to give you this training to help you build your base.
When are we filling this out?
I just dropped into the chat, and so did Anya, and it's an electronic form.
Well,
And
I
so
know, we have to fill it out right now.
Yeah, it should take you 1 or 2 minutes. Or if you need to go looking for lists, you can fill it out later and just keep it up on your screen and send it in, you know, by tomorrow ideally, but no pressure really. But I'd love to see it, you know, in the next few days so that I can compile the data and assess how this helped you or didn't help you in building your base.
Sheila, do you plan to have a follow-up poll? Because it seems like, to me, I feel like I've got concepts, I'm letting them simmer, I'm letting myself find the right ways to apply them, and I expect fruition in the next 2 or 3 months, but certainly not in the same week that I've just heard the things. So are you going to have a follow-up?
It's a great idea. We can do it that way too. Yeah, I figured you probably hadn't like put together a whole tabling event based off of this in the last few weeks, but maybe had a one-to-one with someone new, you know, or I think the form also asks, you know, have you had like a tabling event, or are you planning one, for instance, like, do you have a date in mind? So both of those would be different ways to answer it now. And then maybe we can do a follow-up in a month and see where people are at later too. And I like that idea. So thank you. While you're looking at that and filling it out to the best of your ability, I'm also going to just remind folks that while our power comes from our numbers, you know, the world is also run by money. And so Mothers Out Front takes donations through members like you of any size to help run this movement and keep it going. And so I'm going to drop into the chat a feedback form for today's training and the opportunity to become a paying member, which is at any level that you want to. And then our next training in the series is coming up next Saturday, August 13th from 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. And so this is what we've done is we've kind of joined together this 4-part building series with the 2-part winning climate organizing, racial justice to the center, to make, you know, one longer one for you all, and for other people, we're going to be joined by a horde of more people based on RSVPs to do this training on anti-racism and climate change. And so we're really looking forward to that. We worked with an incredible organization called Aorta, And Anya has been a part of that team from the beginning, to put on and create an incredible, first step to looking at what are the intersections between racism and climate change. How does that show up in movement work, and what can we do to begin to change that and dismantle that in our organizing? So I hope that you come and bring a friend next Saturday and Sunday too. Will be those two parts.
And shameless plug, our new ED is going to be part of the training team. And this is something that none of us have ever experienced, an ED joining, taking the training, becoming a trainer, and, doing this on the weekends to kind of make sure that the message is very clear that this is very much part of the movement. And so you'll be able to meet with her, and she'll be coordinating certain sessions of the training as well.
What is an ED?
Sorry, ED is Beth Ship. We just got an ED 2 months ago.
An executive director.
Director,
Thank you.
not like ED, a person ED, sorry, executive director. And yeah, so it's very exciting for us that she's hearing the same things we are hearing from the trainers, and she's thinking about it the same way.
Before the chat is closed, I want to mention that Barbara asked about gas leaks map. So I put the map into that. And
Thank you.
in preparation for next weekend, I've been listening to an amazing audiobook. Biased is the name of the book, and it's by a Black sociologist about, and it will amaze you the ways in which we're biased.
Programmed.
Yeah, our culture. So I recommend it for people who want to do extracurricular reading.
Thank you.
And I want to make sure I put in the Fresh Banana Leaves by Jessica Hernandez, the book that I was talking about in one of our breakout rooms. That's the one that we did. I don't know if some of you attended that event where we discussed the book a little bit, and she talked about it, and it was very powerful. So check that one out too. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, I want to thank you all for being here. I think all of your faces have been familiar faces for most of the series. And so, you're either established leaders who are working to get new folks in and up the leadership ladder, or maybe you're new and you're wanting to start a new team. And either way, you are the backbone of Mothers Out Front. You guys being here, really wanting to build the movement. That's what it's all about. So I just want to thank you for your time and your energy, and hope that this has been helpful in some way to your base building efforts. And know that you can always reach out to if you have follow-up questions. I know a few people were interested in getting this slide deck. Just remind me. I'll drop my email in the chat again, and I'm happy to share the slide deck with you. And we will be getting recordings of all of these up on our website just as soon as our communications department can edit them and post them, which I hope will be soon. But if you're like, look, I missed one, I need it now, I can also send you the unedited version. And that, again, just email me. Put my email here. So thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful night. And thank you, Anya, for your wonderful facilitation tonight.
Well, thank you, Sheila, for putting all of this together, and thank you everyone for taking time out on a Sunday.
Thank you. This was great. This was really great.
Thank you.